Michael, it's really brilliant to have you on set with us to talk a bit about this afternoon. We've got a bit of a flavour of what you do there. Just quite generally, give us a bit more of a broad oversight of the kind of work that you do with sports people.
I'd like to think that I've become someone they can trust, talk to, have a chat with informally. Don't really do meetings because I think the world is full of meetings and full of information. And just a reasonably interesting, safe, sometimes funny place to go to, sometimes with Paisley, sometimes not. Just in a world, as I said, they're full of measurement and scrutiny. I'm maybe the release from that sometimes. But the timing is crucial. The timing is always crucial.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit more about the dog or the dogs. We know that Arsenal use them as well. Just give us an insight. How do you use them? How does it resonate with people at the clubs?
I think Arsenal followed suit because I used to have a dog called Shankly. You can spot the link here, Shankly, Paisley. Not a Liverpool fan, but just good names for dogs, and the plan being they'd never walk alone. And it was by accident when I worked at Middlesbrough and Hull City before Brentford years ago with the first dog, and it can calm an atmosphere. Timing is crucial, never before training. So lives in a nice car during training, and sometimes it can just help start a different conversation and make life very normal. And lots of players and staff also like an animal, like a dog. So why not? Because, as I keep stressing, in a world full of scrutiny and measurement, judgment and numbers, it's just something a bit more normal, and it can make conversation on a bench much easier and much more free-flowing, because I want to be on their side and helping people and the staff, if I can make that point, Joe. It's not just about players in football as well, it's staff. We all can get quite anxious, all of us, around results, because it's the most irrational and the most emotional sport of all, as we know. So I just try and take the sting out of that.
Yeah, let's get into the emotions a little bit, because Ivan Toney name-checked you after the Slovakia game. He was talking about how he was pretty angry about being brought on with only a minute to go, but used some of the techniques that he'd learned to keep those emotions in check. How difficult is it to use those techniques in such high-pressure moments, though?
Well, it's the ultimate test. Can you do that? And it was kind of Ivan, very generous, and I didn't know he was going to say that. So that's just typical Ivan, taking you by surprise. And every player in any squad wants to play. And I know we've developed new language and about the role of substitutes, but players want to start, they want to play. And I've always learned over the years that the most frustrating things in life is to be trained to do something and not do it. And that includes injured players also, who go through real torture when they're... Luke Shaw spoke about it this week. So to keep the emotions in check and to channel the energy, and you might have one moment. He had one moment to affect the game, and he did. So yes, was I cheering in front of my TV? Yes, and he's as anxious as anyone to get on that pitch and prove a point, because that's what he wants to do. That's his stage, and he loves the big stage, as we saw.
Yeah, I mean, talking about the big stage, it doesn't get much bigger than taking penalties as well. Tell us a little bit about the psychology of particularly his penalty technique, because looking at the goalkeeper, not the ball, there has to be a psychology behind that.
There's a great skill behind it,
yeah.
And there's years of practice behind it, and a bucket load of courage and confidence and trust in that technique and in that process. And I think we're all talking about it now, but at Brentford in particular, we've been seeing it for years, because that's what he does. That's how he does it. And I would just call it his penalty and his routine, and he completely owns that penalty. And he's got it down to a pretty good art now. And I hope he doesn't need it again, because it'd be nice to win in normal time. But that is the ultimate example under pressure of trusting your process and trusting your technique. And it's a remarkable skill, both psychologically, and there he is throwing darts out looking at it. And he's got a sense of humour as well, by the way. He's cheeky. And that's what makes him so good and so interesting.
I mean, it's absolutely brilliant, seeing that. Talk a little bit, there was something that quite a few of us noticed, was this kind of buddy system that seemed to be in place in terms of another player walking so far with the penalty taker. What is the psychology behind that in terms of, you know, because we don't see a lot of other teams do that, and how might it help the penalty taker? I
think taking a penalty in a penalty shootout in a global competition is possibly the loneliest place in the world in sport. You could think of a golfer, he's got a caddy. You might think of a darts player trying to finish in the World Championship. It probably doesn't get any lonelier than that walk from the halfway line to the penalty spot. So to have someone there to see you off and to greet you after you've hopefully scored the penalty. it just decreases that anxiety and that loneliness, because you've got someone there at least who's with you. Because everything goes wrong and all your fears, worries attack when you're completely lonely. So it's just to give you someone who you can be with. And even if you think of TV presenters, you might hold a pen, you might have a laptop, you want something there, because otherwise there's nothing there. And I think also, to give great credit to the FA, to all the researchers over the years, the scientists behind, who we'll never hear about, who've researched this to the nth degree, so that it gives us the chance to celebrate that joyous moment the other night.
You've picked up on my pen technique.
Well, there we are.
Yeah,
there we
exactly. Bukayo Saka, we've got to talk about him a little bit, because, of course, he's had these extremes of shootouts. When you think about what happened last time out, how difficult is it for a player to kind of recover from something that happened like that, the penalty miss and what he received after that, to then stepping up and cool as you like?
The reason, Joe, I admire footballers so much, and I like them and I admire them, is they've got the courage to do things that most of us would just crumble if we were asked to do the same thing. We know what he went through on the pitch and off the pitch at Wembley. To come back and do that, and the smile that then lights up the nation. But the only thing that makes you better at something and stronger in life is, I'm afraid, setbacks, adversity. And we've all been through them in all walks of life. And you hear some of the remarkable tales from sport and outside of sport. And what he went through, a bit like the current manager, was awful. But not only has he learned from it, he's now a stronger person for it. Still remarkably young. And for a young man, and he is unbelievably young, to come through that, learn the technique and do that the other night, that's why I admire footballers on the big stage so much, because that's remarkable courage to do that.
How much credit do you think Gareth Southgate deserves for the work that he's clearly putting into researching this side of things and the impact that is making on this team?
I speak with bias, which is hopeless, but I'll say it anyway. The answer is probably not enough, because all we see is the score. We're driven by the score, we're driven by the outcome. So if we win the other night in the penalty shootout, the world is perfect. If we lose, he's hopeless. And actually the truth is somewhere in between. But if you think of his track record in the job, which is, I think, 3 semi-finals from 4 tournaments, 100 games, now 101, thankfully, and the amount of work he's done behind the scenes to change the perception of England. Even the fans have changed over the years, because I think we've followed a decent leader driven by duty and service, which that's how he sees it. And I hope, for thousands of reasons, that England win the competition, but I hope also then that people can accept and understand who he really is, because underneath the character some people don't warm to is a man of great resilience and dignity, and I hope that it comes good for him too, as well as the players.
Yeah, and I mean, they have received a bit of criticism with the way they've been playing at the start of this tournament. Yeah, absolutely. How do players deal with that pressure as the tournament gets further in? They're at a semi-final. How easy, how difficult is it to deal with that pressure and perhaps have to do it again in this semi-final in terms of going all the way?
It's a very good question, because it's not easy, and actually, and again, this isn't an excuse, it's not some clever answer, because many people have been saying it for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Some people have bemoaned the lack of excitement sometimes in the competition. But most of these players at this stage of the competition have been on the go for the best part of a year, and every week they play for Madrid or Manchester City or Liverpool or Arsenal or whatever, it's nearly a must-win game, and they have been under scrutiny now for the best part, well, most of their lives anyway, but particularly in elite competition. And now they've got to do it again, and the tank is pretty empty by this stage of the season, which explains why it's quite hard to play beautifully all the time, and also deal with the hope, because they're carrying our hopes, your hopes, and everyone else's hopes. So it's not easy, and that's why I admire them, because they do it week in, week out, and they're providing thrilling entertainment. And I just hope now for most of us there's a happy ending.
Yeah.